Would Boeing murder a whistleblower? My name is James Lee, and you're watching Beyond the Headlines on Breaking Points.
This morning, police in Charleston, South Carolina tell NBC News they are aware of the death of a former Boeing employee turned whistleblower.
John Mitchell Barnett, a notable whistleblower known for his substantial safety and quality reports to the Federal Aviation Administration concerning Boeing's production of the 787 Dreamliner, who also appeared in the 2022 Netflix documentary Downfall: The Case Against Boeing, tragically passed away on March 9, 2024. The mainstream media have mostly reported his death as an apparent suicide. Barnett was found dead in his car in the parking lot of his hotel on the final day of depositions in his whistleblower case against Boeing. The curious timing of his death have sparked some suspicions of foul play, and adding to that mystery, reports also indicate that he had previously cautioned a family friend not to accept any official narratives about his death as a suicide.
He wasn't concerned about safety because I asked him, I said, "Aren't you scared?" And he said, and his voice and the way he would talk, "No, I ain't scared." He said, "But if anything happens to me, it's not suicide."
Joining us today is Moe Tkacik. She is the investigations editor at the American Prospect, who has done some fantastic reporting on Boeing. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, we're not going to bury the lead today. Did Boeing put out a hit on whistleblower John Barnett? Obviously, everything is still under investigation, but I know in your recent article you mentioned talking to a few of his old colleagues, also a former Boeing executive. What are their thoughts? Also, at this point, what do we know for sure?
Well, what we know for sure is that John Barnett was found dead in his Dodge Ram in the parking lot of a hotel where he was staying in Charleston, South Carolina, to give a deposition that had lasted it was a 3-day deposition. He was on the 3rd day, and he was found dead in his car from an apparently self-inflicted gunshot wound. He was holding a silver pistol. My sense is that the pistol did belong to him, but that hasn't been confirmed one way or the other. And there was something that was in the driver's seat that looked like something like a note. Again, the details on that have not really been released yet. So my first impression was that, oh, this guy must have killed himself, right? I mean, it kind of doesn't, it really, like, I'm always open to the idea that, foul play might be there. I started to change my mind when I think a lot of workers, former Boeing workers in both the factories and in the executive offices, were completely open to the notion that Boeing might have done it. I spoke to one of his former coworkers in particular, who was very terrified. This person did not want to be identified, didn't want, anything that they told me to be, to make them identifiable. But this person told me that, and this person had, blown the whistle at this same Boeing factory and dealt with a lot of fallout as a result of that. And this person told me straight up, if I die, please, like, there's no way I would ever commit suicide. Like, even if it is a car accident, like, please, like, get it investigated. I mean, that was just not what I expected. I did not expect anybody who worked at Boeing to think that Boeing would do this. There's incredibly bad morale within that company. Everybody who cared about the company for decades, sometimes a half century, the people who have, I've written about Boeing for about 5 years on and off, and most of my sources worked there for at least 30 years. It was very close to their heart. And that's why, when you talk to the old Boeing heads, they always bring up the McDonnell Douglas merger. This is 26 years ago, but it feels like yesterday to a lot of these folks, because that is when everything changed. And learning more about John Barnett, He was at this point in his case where the home stretch was in sight. He was really excited. He was thinking about writing a book. He was thinking about trying to, do some sort of a podcast. He was thinking about, finally enjoying his retirement for once. He was slated to likely, receive a fair bit of money because he'd been kind of pushed out of the company early. He had no real motive to kill himself, especially on day 3 of a 3-day deposition. On the other hand, of course, again, they did a very good job. Anyone who's seen the octopus murders, if somebody assassinated him, they weren't sloppy about it. They really did a very good job at making it look like a potential suicide. Of course, there's a lot that we don't know. We don't know what that note looks like. That's extremely important evidence. We don't know what the wound looks like. All of that has yet to come out.
Yeah, do we have I'm wondering if we have a timeline for the investigation. So you said it was the Charleston Police Department that's involved. Is it just them, or are there federal agencies getting in on the action?
No federal agencies as of yet. Again, the law enforcement has been, repeatedly said, hey, it's still under investigation. And everybody who knows anything, like his family and his lawyer, they've been pretty tight-lipped because they don't want to antagonize. The thing that that is a little bit troubling. I spoke with a medical examiner in Jacksonville, and he said, like in suicide, and one thing about suspected suicides is that generally in a lot of bigger areas these days, they don't actually have medical examiners doing those autopsies. Those autopsies are oftentimes performed by coroner assistants. And I spoke to some a criminal profiler from who had been with the FBI for a long time, worked on the Unabomber case. And this guy, Jim Fitzgerald, told me that it seemed like it was the type of thing that, if you were going to look at it as a potential assassination, the whole aspect, the whole saga made him think that it was like a warning sign, that it wasn't necessarily that they were trying to prevent him from testifying since he had already given 2 days of depositions, but that they were trying to send out a warning to anybody else who might think about, potentially blowing the whistle themselves.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about there was one interesting quote that I read in your article. I believe it was an anonymous quote from a former Boeing executive, and you wrote, or he said that it's a top secret military contractor. Remember, there are spies everywhere, and more importantly, there is a principle in American law that there's no such thing as an accidental death during the commission of a felony. I was wondering if you could expand on that. What did he mean by this?
So here's the thing, and this is the broader context here. Boeing has been extraordinarily lucky up till now. 346 people, passenger and crew, died on 737 MAX crashes in 2018 and 2019, 4.5 months apart. Almost identical crashes. And after the first 189 died on a Lion Air accident, they knew that there was something wrong. Everybody in Boeing knew that this was going to happen again. It was just a matter of when, not if. They should have obviously grounded the plane after the first 189 passengers and crew died. That is obvious. They did not do that. Instead of doing that, they authorized $20 billion in additional share buybacks and introduced a program to eliminate quality control, essentially. So when they talk about the commission of a felony, they're talking about the murder of those 157 additional passengers. And this is a felony that required a lot of, a pretty vast conspiracy to actually get away with, because Boeing was under criminal investigation after the first MCAS crash in 2018. The criminal investigation widened, understandably, after the second crash. It widened to include the 787 factory. It widened to include an investigation that involved extensive interviews of John Barnett. And then it narrowed. Then sometime in 2020, the prosecutors that were handling the case against Boeing got changed, and the case got transferred to Texas from the New York Fraud Department. And Boeing ended up on January 6th, 2021. Um,
Same date.
understandably, this never made any headlines, but on January 6th, 2021, Boeing signed what is known as a deferred prosecution agreement. And the Justice Department essentially agreed to not prosecute Boeing because, as it said, the problems that they found in the company were not systemic and they involved very few people. So while Boeing got away with it, with this real, I mean, you can't even call it a slap on the wrist. It's like a wrist massage.
Yeah, I
That
think you compared
sorry.
that. Yeah, I think you compared that to in one of your articles as like similar to the sweetheart deal that Jeffrey Epstein got in 2007. So I'm wondering how is Boeing able to secure such a deal from the DOJ?
Well, it's not simply similar. It involves a lot of the same people. It involves, very senior partners at the mega law firm Kirkland and Ellis. Crucially, Boeing's chief criminal defense attorney in this case was the deputy attorney general under, I believe it was Mukasey during the Bush administration, who is the highest known official to sign off on Jeffrey Epstein's 2007 non-prosecution agreement. Both of those agreements were very similar in that they required lies, right? The government actually lies, and it's the deferred prosecution agreement on Boeing saying that there were no systemic problems. Everything that we found, this is a solidly ethical company. Nothing happened. This is just provably false. And similarly with Epstein, I forget what the exact phrasing was, but that agreement actually indemnified all of his conspirators, even those who were not even named. Both agreements drafted by senior partners at Kirkland and Ellis and put together by there's a lot of cross-pollination in those two agreements. In fact, the Merrick Garland's DOJ made the case that they aren't actually victims. The poor people who died on Ethiopia 301, they were not actually the victims of the crime. The only victim of Boeing's crime is the FAA.
Yeah, it's a lot of disturbing details coming out right now. But before we wrap, I wanted to ask, or I wanted to talk about Boeing's future for a minute because I think it's important that maybe it's in America's best interest to have a competent commercial airline manufacturer. And we did see some leadership reshuffle after the MAX crashes you were talking about in 2018, 2019. And now we're also seeing another leadership reshuffle with Dave Calhoun. He's stepping down along with some other executives at the end of the year with some pretty robust exit packages. And then it all depends on, it's like tied to the company's stock price in the coming years. So my question is, can Boeing actually course correct here if stock performance is still the number one incentive that's driving executive compensation?
I I don't really understand the stock. I would say no. I would say that Boeing, that the stock price, it, there needs to be some sort of extreme management overhaul. When they did appoint, I mean, it was very obvious. Calhoun was it was like when Tim Geithner was nominated for Treasury Secretary. Pretty much everyone who knew who Tim Geithner was like, oh God, nothing's going to happen. No one's going to get in trouble. Everybody is just going to get away with it. And that's what happened. And David Calhoun is a similar figure. He was the lead, director of the board. He was the biggest, I mean, he's a guy who worked at GE and Blackstone. He doesn't actually show up to the office ever. He changed where the office was. He, uses the perch to fly his plane around. I mean, he's a completely worthless piece of shit. I say that without knowing it, but the latest trendy thing to say about Boeing is that what they really need is Larry Culp, the current CEO of GE, a sort of an irony because Boeing's 3 out of their last 4 CEOs have come from GE, have been proteges of Jack Welch, and they've absolutely fucked Boeing just the same way that Jack Welch ultimately fucked GE by completely financializing it and refusing to grapple with the fact that building something that involves 4 million parts is not the same thing as, like manufacturing light bulbs or post-it notes, which is what, McNerney used to do. So I think that there is a real effort within the sort of, Davos set to say, hey, no, actually the market can take care of this. And if they just hire the right guy, the right MBA, this guy, Larry Culp, who maybe isn't as much of a sociopath, who believe in building companies and putting them on the road to growth, and who believe in quality, because it has been such a, total, it's very clear to like everyone in aviation now that Boeing actually can't build a plane, that they have lost the ability to competently build an airplane. And that is like an existential problem. And it's not reflected in the stock price. I think a lot of that stuff is, the product of algorithms and this sort of conspiracy of algorithms and fraud.
Yeah, as an MBA myself, I can confirm a lot of sociopathic behavior that I see.
Yeah.
And no, they don't know, they don't think it's that way, but it is from outside looking in. It definitely is. This is obviously a developing story, so hope to have you back on. Really quick, anywhere you want to point the audience to if they want to find, or if you want them to find more of your work.
If you look at prospect.org and search for Boeing, I think you'll find a lot of my stories. I also write a lot about healthcare and all kinds of things. So anything that involves the intersection of organized crime and finance, I like to sniff around those cases.
Awesome. Well, everybody go follow Mo. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
That is it for me this week. If you're looking for more documentary style deep dives on various topics related to business, politics, and society, you can follow me on my YouTube channel, 5149 with James Lee. The link will be in the description below. As always, keep on tuning into Breaking Points, and thank you for your time today.